Hey there, welcome to episode 112 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. Can't believe it's already 2 seasons of episode 112. It's crazy. It's 1:23 in the afternoon on Tuesday, April 8, 2025. If you are not familiar with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, we are a Nevada nonprofit corporation. We are a 501c3 public charity, by the way. We were founded as Code for Vegas Foundation in June of 2022. We began rebooting the Code for Vegas organization from, I think it was almost 10 years prior. Well, it was about 8 years prior to that when it went quiet for a while. So basically, we've been up and running since January of 2022, incorporated in June, public charity status granted in October, retroactive to June. And here we are. So we're coming up on, in June, it'll be 3 full years as a corporation and as a 501c3 public charity. And we're just over 3 years since we first said, hey, let's reboot Code for Vegas. So I thought I would take this opportunity to talk about volunteer realities, the topic and title of today's episode. Our purpose statement, which I've mentioned before, it is on file. It's part of the extremely simple process of forming a nonprofit here in Nevada. And it's somewhere in our 501c3 1023EZ filing. The purpose of our organization is to ideate, I'm getting ahead of myself, to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. Designed to be purposely vague. Do we say coding? No. We just talk about ideas, being inventive with applying those ideas, and then implementing them, making them happen to try to make our communities better, a community elevation. And this is basically the crux of what brigades were doing back in the Code for America days before they ended that program. Essentially asking volunteers from a particular locality, a community perhaps, to contribute their time, effort, and expertise to making their communities better. You could also be involved with projects at a larger, grander scale. The economics of Code for America are what they were, but on a local basis, any organization, any group of volunteers who wanted to spend their time making their surroundings better, their friends, family, neighbors, and so on, a little bit better off through their efforts and activities and so on to close gaps to again, elevate communities. More power to us. And so today I'm going to talk about some of the realities that I've talked about with other people who volunteer their time, effort, and expertise for such things, including myself. And let's see what we come up with. And obviously, as with every aspect of this entire program, if you have thoughts to express, by all means, come on down. Let's have an episode together and talk. We are always willing to listen to ideas. That doesn't sound right. We want more ideas. We want more discussion and conversation. Willing, that sounds a little weird. It's part of what we're trying to accomplish is to be open and inviting to other people with innovative ideas. Ideate, innovate, implement. Those are the keys. The missing fourth eye is integrate, to play nice with others. That will bring on a case-by-case basis. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a summary of today's episode, which I will read to you. And then today we have just the usual 4 links, which I'll flip through rather quickly. If you've heard the show before, they're the same 4. If not, I guess you'll be hearing them for the first time. They're 4 initiative links, essentially. One's our homepage. Anyway, we'll get to that in a moment. The summary of today's episode: whether a civic volunteer organization such as ours or any activity to which you commit your volunteer time, effort, and expertise, there is something different about working in something other than a workplace that brings with it norms and expectations. That is, if you are working in a workplace, there are rules, people are being paid for their time, there's a human resources department, et cetera, et cetera. Do they translate to the world of volunteer initiatives? Well, spoiler alert, not really. Some do, some not. The links for today's episode include a link to our homepage, innovateforvegas.org, innovate F-O-R Vegas, no punctuation in there, innovate for Vegas, and then a period, O-R-G. That's our homepage, our home website. It's published on GitHub Pages, not intended to be overly attractive so much as functional. That could change. There are only 24 hours in a day. So if any of our volunteer cohort would like to participate in a website 2.0 or something similar, that would be great. We have a few other properties that would probably deserve more attention as we get those moving along. And they're not even linked here. I'm not even talking about the ones that I'm going to mention here. Projectact.info, that's project, Project, a hyphen or a dash. It's the key next to the 0 on your keyboard, on most keyboards. And then ACT, and then a period, and then info, INFO, projectact.info. Project ACT started life as our autonomous cohort transformation effort, which was to help other organizations do what we did, which was to form a standalone nonprofit corporation in the state in which we are based, and then pursue 501c3 status. Another opportunity to act as a charity is to become a fiscally sponsored entity. That's another option for others, but for anyone. So we said, hey, how can we help other organizations who want to become an independent, standalone organization similar to ours or similar to what we were doing? Autonomous cohort transformation. Well, then Code for America sunset their brigade program. So we said, hey, what if we make the transformation is still a possibility? You can always transform from one or more people who have some ideas that they'd like to pursue to how do we go about becoming a nonprofit? Is it worthwhile? There are a couple of ways to get advice about this, or, obviously legal advice is not what we're talking about, but just thoughts, possibilities, advantages, disadvantages, and so on. So that's still an option that we'd like to pursue, is to enable and encourage that. But the Project Act is focused maybe a little bit more on autonomous cohort tessellation. A tessellation is a mosaic, so it happens to have the same acronym, Project Act. The tessellation is essentially the representation of cohorts and their initiatives and projects so that they are discoverable. And once you can discover other people working on things that you're working on, vice versa, the possibilities for connection, communication, and collaboration go up, which is what we would be trying to encourage. So Project Act is about that, very much an initiative in progress. Same with agileforvolunteers.org. Agile for Volunteers, all one word, FOR, spelled out, Agile for Volunteers, .org. That's our take on the Agile methodology that was developed by and for programmers some 24 years ago. It was February 2001, if I'm remembering correctly. So we're taking that and applying it to non-software development by non-software developers. You need not be a coder to be innovative. And then we're applying it to people who are not paid. They're not full-time employees of a software development company. They are volunteers who are contributing their time, effort, and expertise along multiple axes, not just software development. So how can we apply whole team, iterative, delivering good stuff, all the trappings of Agile, but without the painful parts that have been applied over time by the Agile industrial complex? So we're keeping it simple, keeping it light, and as with everything else, a work in progress that others can contribute to. We've broken it out into a separate initiative with its own website, also on GitHub. There's a link to that on the main website to encourage people to participate in its evolution over time. So that's those. And then every week I do mention that we will be launching our Mastodon.Vegas server for ActivityPub in and about our locality, the greater Vegas area. It's simply not at the top of a to-do list or priority list at the moment, but it will be. So we'll be entering the Fediverse on behalf of Vegas. And this will be a project or an initiative. It's not really an initiative. It's I mentioned earlier the integration step. It's an integration of ActivityPub, which is a standard protocol that's fueling the Fediverse, introducing that into the greater Vegas area as part of our other efforts, our other initiatives. So Mastodon.Vegas will be managed and maintained, if you like, by our nonprofit public charity. Maybe a donation driver, that would be nice. But generally, it will not be a for-profit, advertisement-laden effort. It will be open for donations and whatnot. But so that's on the roadmap. It's not essential today, but it will be. And so I try to mention it now and then. Keep it at the fore Also, .vegas domains are ridiculously expensive. That's annoying. So let's get on with the episode. No links today. I was going to maybe look for volunteering or other, but you can find these things. And every nonprofit, every volunteer organization is going to be a little bit different. So there will be a severe bias in this presentation toward the way that we're doing things, but hopefully not too much, not to the point where it's not applicable to anything else. But let's see. So those differences, not every volunteer organization is the same. Some have paid employees managing operations and the goings on. Others, like our foundation, are 100% volunteer from top to bottom. I am not compensated one iota for this audio program, for production, for coding, for having my office hours, any of the things that I'm doing to try to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. There are probably many instances where this isn't so clear how compensation and volunteer participation are coupled or decoupled. So perhaps there is a gray area in the middle. Some people are paid to do the management stuff, but are not paid for their volunteer efforts, if that makes sense. So you may be paid to do the treasurer's role. Maybe that's filing taxes or dealing with payments and incoming and outgoing, receivable and payable, I suppose. Managing any donations and so on, doing the 990 filings with the IRS, or making sure that those happen through some external service, perhaps. But at the same time, you might be volunteering your time to work on projects and to participate in events. If your organization is collecting food in a food drive, or picking up litter, or beautifying our communities, or helping people with special needs or unusual circumstances, the list goes on and on. Maybe you're not being paid for that effort. So maybe you're compensated to do the treasurer's role, but you're not compensated for the other, 40 hours a week of pure volunteer time. So there's a gray area there. It's not always completely clear, but in our organization so far, and I'm not saying that's going to change, but so up until this moment, no one is paid for their time. It's 100% volunteer, top to bottom. There are some volunteer organizations that focus on services. So there are beginnings and endings to some effort. And then there's the next one. This could be the one that comes to mind immediately is like holiday food drives. I always wonder if people are hungry or not around the holidays, but that's a separate thing. But if you operate a drive of some sort for cold weather clothing or holiday food drive, or just generally speaking, it's focused on a calendar event or a circumstance like weather or storms or something like this, there's a beginning and an end. And then you're ready for the next, whatever it is. Obviously, we're leaving out the administration of funds, storage of donated items and whatnot. So those are ongoing concerns. But generally speaking, the volunteer push is offering some service or some activity. Then there's like a due date. And this is not universally true. I'm just trying to make a difference between that and volunteer organizations which focus on development of initiatives and projects and perhaps evolution of efforts for continuous improvement, or maybe ongoing offerings in general. That's sort of what we're doing. The operational parts of those transactional services I mentioned above are one example, not above previously, you know what I mean. So there's the ongoing nature, the evolutionary process of building an organization and so on. That is not always left to volunteers. That's sometimes the paid part of a volunteer organization is I don't use this term to be diminishing, but the adult supervision, if you like, having someone who's going to sign their name to checks and be responsible for interactions with the IRS or something, that may be something that gets compensated financially. So that's an ongoing operational, administrative element to a volunteer organization. But community elevations, developing those community elevations that are practically perpetual, there's likely always to be room for improvement over the long term, like we're doing. We don't really have an ending. So we're really offering, they're still kind of like services, but we're trying to build things. So slight difference. So what about joining in? Generally speaking, joining in, you see some people doing some good stuff and you think, oh, I would like to be a part of that. So one of the challenges faced not only by the person who wants to join in some effort as a volunteer, but also by the people already there. is the notion of adding another human being to the mix. It's a challenge because the people already there have history and familiarity. The person joining brings energy and novel ideas. So then, are they going to mix? Is it oil and water? Is it cookie dough and chocolate chips? Volunteers are gold. I always say that. Their time is rarely properly valued, and the outcomes they drive are sometimes appreciated, but not always. Sometimes it's taken for granted that things happen, that things work. I'm not speaking from personal experience here. I'm just saying that in general, I've known many people volunteering their time. That's often one of the pain points is nobody even really understands the effort that goes into something, or the time spent, or the drain on the personal energy, the sacrifice, and so on. So the people out and about sometimes appreciate the outcomes without fully realizing the inputs. Now, am I referring to this recognition from outside of the organization when I say this, or is it sometimes from within? And it's sometimes both. In fact, it's often both. I would argue that it is more important internally to recognize and reconcile the value of experience and of newcomers, that is, the people that are already there and the people that are coming in the front door, newcomers to an effort, and how to embrace new ideas while appreciating the efforts and accomplishments to date. And this can require some effort on the parts of all involved. So often I will hear, and in fact, there was a discussion I had recently with someone, the perspective of someone attempting to join, or they want to be one of those newcomers. They would like to participate in something that's already up and running. It's already got a history. It's already got a track record. It's already doing good things, hopefully. The perspective of a newcomer is maybe there's a barrier to entry, and that is sometimes what will be discussed or what will get attention. But the fact is, both sides of this equation need to be considered. And it's that consideration that brings that barrier to entry into perspective. So I'm going to offer a Linux kernel example. Not everybody's into the kernel. You may or may not be following the Linux kernel in your day-to-day. I don't follow it day-to-day. But the Linux kernel is found in more technology than most people ponder. Most people have no idea, whether it's your Android phone or countless devices in the cloud, Amazon and probably Google and probably not Azure, but maybe, and more. There are tons and tons of cloud services. There are tons and tons of cloud-based applications. There are tons and tons and tons of applications and devices that have all benefited from this Linux kernel, which began back in 1991. It's a result of one person, I wrote Linux. He used to pronounce his name Linus, and it used to be more Linux. But he said when he came to America, he liked Linux better. No, I'm sorry. It used to be, Linus. It used to be Linus was the pronunciation, I think. And so Linux, he said, made more sense to him. But he prefers, I think, pronouncing his name Linus. But the Linux question, it's probably up to you. I kind of messed up that story, but it's not the goal. He decided to publish his development project to the world for others to try out and contribute to back in 1991. There you can find the Usenet postings about Minix and about his concerns about the Minix kernel and about how he was going to try out this new thing. And he said, it probably won't go anywhere. It won't be useful for anybody else. I have an Intel i386 machine. It probably won't work on anything else, and so on and so on. He was incorrect. So between 1991 and today, I don't even know if anyone has a really good accounting of the scope and grandeur of the Linux kernel project. But he is still the lead maintainer of the Linux kernel project, some 34 years or so later. And there are many, 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 many people who have joined in, departed, added, repaired, and generally contributed to the success of the Linux kernel across so many use cases, whether it's different kinds of computers, different types of implementations, different sizes, huge computers or tiny little embedded. Oh, computer stop. Computer stop. Computer stop. Yeah. I wish Amazon would adopt an open source kernel implementation so we could fix these problems. Anyway, where was I? Over time, the Linux kernel became a successful business endeavor, and now it is part of the Linux Foundation and receives contributions from paid employee contributions as far as code and debug and what am I adapting it to new hardware and the business of making the Linux kernel what it is, not financial contributions. So people, pretty much people, it might be AI as more and more time passes. Paid employees of various companies, and they might be straight volunteers or somewhere in the middle. Linus is paid through this foundation, the Linux Foundation, rather handsomely. I believe I saw that in 2022 he received $1.7 million in pay from the foundation. And one might think, oh, that's a lot of money. Only if you believe that all of the effort that he put into it from the very beginning is worthless. So if he's receiving pay, one should remember that, there was a lot of years where he was just doing this because he really wanted to do it. So that there's certainly value there. The math is probably more complicated than we would want to consider. But the fact is, it's not a race. So he's been compensated rather handsomely, and a newcomer to the Linux kernel project might wonder why they would want to contribute as an uncompensated volunteer when other people are getting paid. An easy concern to raise if we discount those many, many years of volunteer effort Linus contributed, and of course the countless compensated and uncompensated hours and expertise contributed by others over these decades. I wrote this decade. That was these decades. So yeah, you're getting on a train that is very long and has been moving for a very long time. So some perspective is in order on both sides, by the way. And we'll get into that here. There are too many possible examples to count of volunteer or hybrid organizations with paid employees and volunteer time and what they're building, and are they giving away what they're building, or are they charging people, or both, or consulting agreements and so on. It's the menu is large. But the take home is this: not every volunteer is entering the same picture over time, but every volunteer and their undertakings has an opportunity. So that's a cumbersome sentence, but I didn't want it to make it sound like the people are the main part, nor what they're building. It's kind of both, right? So the people working on something will benefit from these new ideas, more participation, and the project or the initiative or the undertakings themselves hopefully will also benefit from having more eyes, more hands to do the work, more eyes, more brain cells, however you want to view it, more participation. But there are two caveats, which are these. The existing cohort of volunteers have invested their time, effort, and expertise over some timeline, which is literally a vested interest. Continued progress, success by some measures, possibilities, and ideas, all important, but with the possibility of risk aversion. We don't want to break what we have. And entrenched methods and policies. Change is hard, and we often fall in love with what we've developed over time. The cohort, so bringing in new ideas, fresh perspectives, can be sometimes a little scary, let's be honest. The cohort, so the people that have been working on this thing for however long, needs to provide an on-ramp for newcomers and an interface for bringing new ideas and methods to the table, to the organization, to the group, to the people. And these need to grow with the organization. So as there are more and more people, things need to accommodate the fact that there are more and more people, and that more and more people might be interested, so that there will be more and more and yet more and more people. So growth has to happen across the different components of an organization, including what happens when a new person wants to join. If you're a two-person organization and you want to add one person, that's a huge percentage increase, but a small communications radius, a small entrenched policy consideration, right? Two people have ideas, a third person might bring new ideas, and they can sit at one coffee table in one coffee shop and figure out which will work better and how, and so on. If your organization is 100 or 1,000 or more spread around the world, it's suddenly not so easy. Adding one person is a small change in size, but could be a huge change in direction or possibility. So accommodating these differences over time and size are important. Newcomers, so we just considered the existing cohort of people. Now we'll look at the person trying to join or who wants to join. Newcomers may be excited and have new energy to bring in addition to their time, effort, and expertise. That's always good, usually. They may bring some particular insights from previous engagements in other organizations or on other projects, or plain old novel ideas. Maybe they just have some new, aha, what do you think of this? And these may seem a bit risky or a bit disruptive to the status quo. They may also be brilliant. There should be that on-ramp for newcomers. A newcomer really needs to be willing to take that path and introduce new ideas along the way, but also express those ideas. That is one of the features of volunteering, that time, effort, and expertise. Express those ideas to the people there so that they are not they're not presented as overly disruptive. They may be disruptive, but hey, I have some ideas is very different from what you're doing is wrong. So that on-ramp has it's a way for someone to enter an organization or to participate in some effort, to understand what the group is doing and how they're doing it and so on, but also should provide a way for them to contribute to that process, to what's on that on-ramp, and so on and so on. So it takes some getting used to, but especially in a volunteer organization, someone willing to contribute their time, they are investing in the organization. There are just other people who might have already invested ahead of time. So your share, if you want to count, minutes or seconds as shares in the endeavor, somebody who's been there for years has more personal investment than someone who just wants to join. That doesn't devalue ideas, but it does say that, hey, some of me is in this, and we would like to ask that you join in. We just want you to appreciate that we've put a lot of work into this, but you know what? We're also trying to make this better. And if you want to be a part of that, that's great. It's humans. Humans are involved, and it's often personal motivations that are driving volunteer efforts. So it's not always easy to say, I'll do it for the money. It's usually not the case. So if you look at the kernel project as an example of these, and again, you really don't have to be necessarily interested in or aware of the Linux kernel. Just know that it's a 34-year-old organization of people that are very talented, but who also have intense emotional investments and some ego and some other human factors. The core maintainers, that include Linus himself, but also a lot of other people, they're a fairly elite group of developers and contributors, which at first may seem off-putting, like they're better than you. But one must remember that the scope of the project and how that scope has grown over the decades is kind of crazy. One person in Finland, Linus, posting on Usenet, and nobody but him using his software, versus millions of people depending on it and using it daily, countless hardware platforms and so on. Over time, the people that are responsible or who have accepted responsibility for that scope and grandeur are, they're not exalted, but they certainly deserve a certain amount of respect for the success, if nothing else, with all the bumps and bruises. The on-ramp for contribution, much less substantive participation, that is, substantive participation in the Linux kernel organization is a really steep hill to climb. But the on-ramp for contribution has only become steeper over that time, partially because of that scope, but also because of the decades of contribution, paid and otherwise, already present. So these people who have already spent their time, effort, and expertise, their blood, sweat, and tears, if you like, they have a lot invested. They are vested. At the same time, newcomers familiar with new technologies, new methodologies, and new ideas in general can always try their ideas out in the Linux kernel. This is the nature of open source projects like this. So they can certainly try, oh, look, it works. And look, I've done this quantifiable improvement or whatever the case. It doesn't break everything. You can always try that on your own. However, to add their contribution to the project itself or others to treat as an actual part of the Linux kernel is rather involved and sometimes emotionally and politically charged and often taking place in public. And it's an often, not often, it can sometimes be a chaotic undertaking. If it makes the news, that's pretty crazy. Certainly joining the project is all that and more. So if you want to just add some code, even if you're from Intel or even if you're from IBM, the Linux kernel maintainers, Linus himself and others, might say, no, this doesn't work, or it breaks the system, or it didn't follow our contributing policies, whatever it is. They kind of have to police it. Why? Because even though it's open for others to participate in it, it does sort of belong to them, emotionally at least. So they have a certain amount of responsibility for its continued functionality and quality and so on. And they take that very seriously. And you will probably find that people who are spending their time, especially uncompensated, on something will treat that something like it belongs to them. And that's probably not a bad way to look at it. The project is important to its core developers and, honestly, to millions of people out in the world, maybe billions. The barrier to entry is quite high and probably for better, maybe for worse sometimes, but a trial by fire. If you are going to change something that will affect one person, okay, we'll fix it. If you're going to do something that's going to impact, let's call it 1 billion people. I don't know how many people are depending on Linux. It's probably even more than 1 billion. But if you're going to break something that impacts 1 billion people, that is worth maybe a trial by fire, maybe a little bit of extra headache, especially if you want to make a big change that nobody is comfortable with. It's an argument to have. The fact that you can have that argument is worth consideration, though. The fact that you could speak to the people who make these decisions and try to sway them in your direction for these reasons and so on is one of the things that makes an open organization like that interesting. And you can still apply your idea to your own version of the kernel. So at once simpler and more complicated. Generally speaking, that barrier to entry will get a little bit taller as the organization grows, whether it's in size or scope, like the number of people. As the legacy of volunteer contribution becomes more tangible, and as the scope of impact increases, so the number of people who depend on or benefit from what you're doing, or what the organization is doing. As more people are aware of a particular project and its impact, like as more people became intrigued by the Linux project, but in general, in your town, in your city, if more people see that, oh, look, this is a really good organization that does a lot of good for our communities and helps a lot of people, I wonder if I could be involved. There are more people interested in contributing. And this could be time or money, or, they could be donors, or they could be showing up and saying, what can I do to help? And this is whether they like the cause itself or they see it as an opportunity to add their own ideas or to improve it. Like, I love what you're doing. And then perhaps part B is, and I have some ideas. And there's bound to be some trepidation as the amount of history grows. So the more and more time people are vested, the less and less likely they are to just simply say, yeah, let's change everything. There may be a little bit of consternation, but that's okay. That's sort of like checks and balances, which are becoming a rare thing nowadays. But if you can actually say, I have an idea, and someone else says, well, I've been here for a few years and I'm not eager to change. And then there's a discussion and then, oh, yeah, I can see where, 50% of what you're suggesting we could try now, and then we can try out the other parts over time and so on. So discussion is usually the path to the negotiated path to some sort of general improvement. So our foundation in this context, we have a board of directors, all volunteers, including myself. Our goals revolve around community elevation and, as we state in our purpose statement, in fact, enabling and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. That is explicitly our purpose. Everything, and it's so purposely vague. Everything we do is open source. There may be exceptions at some point, but this has been true thus far. So, yeah, sometime in the future, if you pull this up and say, look, I'll say, well, it was true at that moment, which it is. So our open source stuff is visible, transparent. Our contributing documents, our terms, we don't have terms of service yet. Our code of conduct and our bylaws and everything is open to the public. But this is generally good practice for a nonprofit anyway, especially a charity. But we're doing all those things, and all of our projects are open source. Anybody can contribute or make use of them. This is our goals explicitly with our Project Act and our Agile for Volunteers initiatives. If other people want to make use of them, great. That's the entire purpose for either or for both of them. We're about as transparent as possible while maintaining the minimum personal or organizational privacy policies one might expect. So we're not going to tell you people's social security numbers, which is absurd, but generally speaking, as much as can be open is open. Our board meetings are open to the public. They're virtual. So the meeting is published on our gatherings calendar when we have board meetings, and they are open to the public unless there's some matter that is not, and then that would be in a closed session. But so far we haven't had any need to do that. So open, transparent, inviting people to know what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. Everything we have in place as I speak right now is the culmination of about 3 years of pondering of the origin of our organization. So that was Code for Vegas, part of Code for America. I think it was before the Brigade program was formalized. So Code for Vegas was an active part of Code for America and participated directly in the implementation of the City of Las Vegas open data platform, if you like, which still exists today. Our reasons for rebooting that organization as Code for Vegas Foundation in 2022 and as a standalone Nevada nonprofit 501c3 public charity, and then the reasons for our renaming, which I have gone into detail several times in previous episodes, but essentially to be more inviting and to escape the legacy of Code for America, probably about 50-50. So I'm not a coder is no longer a concern because we are about innovation, which includes code. But if you want to be an innovator, you don't have to be a coder. Any newcomer is welcome to join in the fun with 3 main requests on the part of our organization, which we can call our on-ramp in the context I've already suggested. So first, consider looking over our how-to documents, our contributing policy, our code of conduct, and what we might call the lay of the land, where we are headed, what we are doing, and how we are doing it. This, by the way, is the driving motivation for our Agile for Volunteers initiative to make sort of a standard form for describing initiatives and component projects and why we're trying to accomplish things and for whom, user stories and features and so on, and where we are progressing towards those with tasks and bugs and so on. So that makes sense. It does, I promise. Then join the discussion. One of the reasons we are establishing some momentum behind open office hours and initiative meetups and this audio program itself, which can have guests, by the way, if you want to join in, not to mention our open GitHub repositories and more, are all intended to provide a transparent part to participation. So if you want to know what you're getting into, everything is laid out. And you can certainly join in the discussion. You can come to an office hours meeting and talk about, hey, you want to start your own cohort in another city or even in Vegas? You want to start your own version of what we're trying to do? Great. It'd be nice if we could collaborate. But we're here to be a part of elevation, it's not a competition. So join in the discussion so you kind of know where we're coming from, where we are, where we're headed, and so on. And then propose over demand. That's a tricky one, but it's basically the crux of what we're talking about here. This is something we encountered in our early days where some who expressed an interest in participating were only interested in participating on their own terms. And the reason for this entire episode today is to suggest that it is a two-way street and that there are two sides to that coin, and any other illustration you have in mind for this. It's true. This is true of our organization as it is likely for many others. The status quo has reasons. The reason things are like they are, the reason that things are named that they are named, the reason that we are using tools that we're using, the policies we have in place, the people that have gotten us here, and so on and so on. Status quo has reasons, but also has possibilities. Proposing changes makes for more discussion to reach those possibilities. Demanding change can often do the opposite. And that's where we are today. How we got here today is more people would like to pursue possibilities. Fewer people have hung around to demand change. Being part of change is fine. Proposing possibilities might include those changes, but demanding changes or deciding that if you're not going to do what I want, then I'm leaving, that's another thing. And the upside to that is we all find out early that this is not for you. But people who would like to be a part of volunteer organizations, I think, don't always have in mind the work, the vested interest that has accumulated in each of the people there before them that is still there. And so proposing changes versus demanding them is probably a t-shirt that we could have printed up. You will find this in the Linux kernel organization. You can propose a change. If you haven't thought it through well enough, you may be abused verbally or in writing, in public sometimes, for wasting people's time, for not reading the documentation, for not considering the contribution policies, and so on and so on. And again, you have to, the scope and grandeur of project is huge. It's bigger than any one person and so on. At the other end of the spectrum is like, you don't have to be so mean. And Linus has been chided for that in particular. He's admitted his shortcomings. And this is not an episode about Linus Torvalds or Linux, other than the fact that it's such a public version of this entire thing. We could pick any organization trying to do good work with good people. And then what happens when politics or ideology or other agenda are injected into the mix, or why, an elite organization might not be so inviting when they really should be, because new ideas are to be found all around, and people who want to contribute should be appreciated, enabled. And if there's not a good fit, that's the way it is. So yeah, I think there's a lot to think about on both sides, on the people already there in a volunteer organization, and the people who would like to join, who would like to go in the front door and see what's up and see if they would like to be a part of it. Ultimately, there are very strong upsides that should be enabled, but there's also the possibility of, incompatible. People are not always made to be, you can't be friends with everyone, as a friend of mine once said, former friend, I think. But if there's opportunity to collaborate, and again, this is one of the goals of Project ACT, the discovery process. Oh, there's somebody doing something that I'm interested in being a part of, or that I already benefit from. How can I connect, communicate, and collaborate with them? And if there's a good fit, perfect. And so we would like to encourage that. We'd like to be a part of encouraging that. We would like people who want to be a part of encouraging that to be a part of what we're doing. It doesn't mean that's a job description. It doesn't mean it's a requirement, but it is something on the list of things to think about. I could probably go on and on, but I don't think I really need to. I think that's about it. If you want to be a part of something, consider the people that are there before you. In the words of Sir Isaac Newton, if I have seen further, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants, because I stand on the shoulders of giants. I don't recall exactly. I used to say if I've seen further and farther to kind of make it a joke, but if he has seen further and he's speaking in the metaphorical or philosophical sense, it is because he is standing on the shoulders of giants, the people who have come before. So to discount those efforts or to ridicule them and so on is not a good start. And so I would always love to see more people say, how did you get here? And here are some ideas I have. Let's see what's up. And so I would encourage that for anyone. And at the same time, I would encourage you to be a part of volunteer organizations, especially civic volunteer organizations around you. It doesn't have to be in Vegas. You don't even need to innovate for Vegas in Vegas if you'd like to work with us on things, our initiatives or your initiatives. If your organization is welcoming of ideas, but they give you a recipe for how to make those ideas palatable, like, hey, we want you to make changes here, but here's how we do it. And this enables people to participate in that conversation, to discuss good and bad, to offer their own take. Any good idea should stand up to criticism or to critique. Let's say critique, because usually the idea will start out in a rough, like, oh yeah, I really didn't think about that one thing, and then at the end of the critique, it'll be a little bit shinier. So that's what we'd love to encourage. But in general, if you are able to participate in some civic volunteer organization near you or even far from you, I highly recommend it. And that is where we're going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program, and we'll see you next week. Maybe more likely you'll hear from us. Take care.